My wife gave my Best Actor award to her sworn brother to help him become a star, an award that should have been mine. When I broke down questioning her, she responded with indifference. You were born in the year of the ox. You're destined to be a workhorse. What's wrong with working for Zhao? Come on, it's just an award. When Zhao gets bored of it after a few years, I'll give it back to you. Later, a famous director was selecting the male lead and personally handed me the script. But my wife, determined to help her sworn brother get the role, arranged for me to be crippled and disfigured on our wedding anniversary. On the night of our wedding anniversary, when I regained consciousness, I found myself locked in the basement. My wife, Du Ruo, stood before me with two bodyguards holding baseball bats behind her, and she sat down facing me. Her smile sent chills down my spine. Brother Qingqi, you're awake? Tomorrow is your audition with Director Wei. Zhao said he wanted to compete with you fairly, but he made a bad impression on Director Wei by being late before. She sighed with feigned difficulty. There's no choice. I had to make you late too. The baseball bats in the two bodyguards' hands gleamed with a cold light. I instinctively started to struggle. I've been married to my wife for 3 years. My wife Du Ruo and I grew up together in an orphanage until we were 18. But the orphanage director wasn't kind to us. We relied on each other for survival, and eventually became lovers. On her 18th birthday, Du Ruo was recognized and taken back by the wealthy Du family. After she left, I couldn't find suitable work because I had dropped out of high school to support Du Ruo's education. I could only work as a stunt double at the film studio because of my looks. When we were young, Du Ruo and I had sworn that once we made something of ourselves, we would expose the orphanage's true nature. However, when I met Du Ruo again, I discovered she was already engaged to another man, the son of the corrupt investor behind the orphanage. When I confronted Du Ruo about it, she simply told me. Zhao was unaware of what happened back then, and it's been so many years anyway. She completely forgot about how the orphanage director almost abused us to death. I originally planned to part ways with Du Ruo, but unexpectedly, during our last meeting, we were both drugged and had no choice but to get married. After marriage, due to our past relationship, Du Ruo and I got along fairly well. But everything started to change when Shun Zhao entered the entertainment industry. Shun Zhao wasn't as good-looking as me, but we were rising actors of the same generation. He would only accept lead roles in major productions, while I worked diligently, willing to take on roles regardless of their size. Gradually, my reputation surpassed his. The Best Actor award from 3 years ago should have been mine, but Du Ruo gave the award to Shun Zhao instead. Her words from then overlap with the present. Brother Qingqi, you've always been able to endure hardships since childhood. Let Zhao have this one. It's no big deal. Her words pierced through me like a sharp knife. An actor's prime only lasts a few years. I'm already 30 now. Who knows when the next opportunity will come? If I miss this chance, I might never be able to fulfill my dream in my lifetime. Du Ruo waved her hand, and two bodyguards aimed their baseball bats at my legs. Sigh, you work too hard, and Director Wei has a good impression of you. After thinking it through, breaking your legs is the safest option. I watched as the baseball bats were about to strike me. Ruo, when we both got into high school together, I voluntarily dropped out to support you. I looked at her with pleading eyes. If my legs don't heal properly after being broken, I won't be able to do action scenes anymore. I made my breakthrough with action scenes, and Du Ruo knows this well. Indeed, I had done her a favor back then. Du Ruo clearly began to waver. I pressed on with my advantage. I promise I'll stay with you obediently for the next 2 days. Won't go anywhere, and wait until after the screen test to go. I won't compete with Shun Zhao. Director Wei had a very good impression of me, and even that male lead role seemed tailor-made for me. After I escape, if I plead with Director Wei, there might still be a chance. However, just when Du Ruo signaled the two bodyguards to leave, and I had just breathed a sigh of relief, Du Ruo's special ringtone for Shun Zhao suddenly rang out. Du Ruo had put it on speaker, and Shun Zhao's complaining voice came through. Ruo, you don't know, Director Wei is determined to meet Gu Qingqi. If he comes, I definitely won't be selected. How about this? Help me ruin his face and break his legs so he can't stand up. Remember to take photos for me. Once he becomes useless, Director Wei will give up on him. The hope that had just risen within me sank inch by inch. Du Ruo's expression, which had been gentle while receiving Shun Zhao's call, turned cold again when she looked at me. She beckoned and took the baseball bat from the bodyguard. I struggled and screamed out, my face covered in tears. Du Ruo, I'm begging you. Don't ruin my entire life. Du Ruo sighed, as if I was being unreasonable, and crouched down to caress my face lovingly. Even if you're paralyzed for life, I'll take care of you, don't worry. I'm not very strong, and it won't hurt much. Brother Qingqi, just bear with it. She spoke while lifting the baseball bat. Thud. The bat struck my leg with tremendous force, the pain making my vision go white as I convulsed uncontrollably. Du Ruo let out a sigh. Shemit D. Didn't break on the first hit. Hold him down for me. Several bodyguards pinned me down firmly. Before the pain from the first blow could subside, Du Ruo raised the baseball bat high again. An even more intense wave of agony swept over me than before. I heard the sound of my own bones breaking, along with the anguished cry that escaped my throat from the extreme pain. I lost count of how many times Du Ruo struck. I only remember finally passing out from the unbearable pain. However, I wasn't unconscious for long before a bucket of water splashed me awake, my face stinging with pain. Du Ruo was holding a mirror in front of me. In the mirror, I saw my legs twisted at an unnatural angle. The crisscrossing scars on my face were still bleeding. I let out a helpless and desperate wail. Du Ruo remained indifferent, taking several photos of my miserable state and sending them to Xin Zhao. I soon heard Xin Zhao's satisfied voice and Director Wei's response. As they had hoped, Director Wei decisively abandoned me after seeing my terrible condition. At that moment, I heard the sound of my dreams shattering. I also heard the cries of young Gu Qingqi and Du Ruo. Du Ruo sighed in relief, crouching down to pat my face. All right, Brother Zhao says thank you for your sacrifice. I also promise you that I won't associate with Brother Zhao anymore, and I'll treat you well. She reached out to embrace me as if she felt very sorry. I forced myself to pull away, looking at Du Ruo with hatred and resentment. Every word was dripping with blood. Du Ruo, I want a divorce. Du Ruo's face darkened as she stepped forward and slapped me, then mercilessly dug her high heel into my broken leg. The pain made me howl instinctively, cold sweat streaming down my entire body. But instead of moving away, Du Ruo slapped me hard again. Gu Qingqi, who gave you the audacity to mention divorce to me? You're now crippled with a comminuted fracture. You're worthless. Without me supporting you, do you think you could survive? Her manicured nails scratched my face, sweat seeping into the wounds. The pain, however, only made me more clear-headed. Looking at Du Ruo's twisted, contorted expression, I spoke softly. I love the Ruo from the orphanage, not this venomous woman you've become. Why don't you let me go and rekindle your relationship with Shen Zhao? Du Ruo froze for a moment, then quickly kicked me to the ground. She hurled every vicious word she knew at me. I looked at my miserable reflection in the mirror she had tossed aside, tears streaming down my face. Du Ruo wasn't like this in the beginning. At the orphanage, the director and deputy director were siblings. There was a pair of siblings at the orphanage who were their children. They kept their children in the orphanage pretending to be orphans, waiting to substitute them for children who were to be adopted by good families. That year, a boy and a girl caught the attention of two wealthy families. The day before the adoption, the director and deputy director locked them in the basement. The next day, their own children were sent as substitutes instead. Since these siblings had been well raised from childhood, they appeared better off than most children in the orphanage. Although the two couples weren't happy about it, they didn't refuse. It was Du Ruo who led me into the basement, bringing two children who should have had beautiful lives back to those two couples. We were punished together afterward. At that time, Du Ruo's eyes were bright, firmly believing in justice. Her whole being seemed to shine. That's why I willingly dropped out of school to support Du Ruo through high school, and why I later agreed to marry Du Ruo, partly out of responsibility for her. Also because when Xin Zhao first bullied me, Du Ruo was just like she had been in her youth, standing up to protect me. She even spoke up for me publicly when Xin Zhao humiliated me. During that time, her life in the Du family wasn't easy either. We relied on each other for quite a while, until Xin Zhao announced his entry into the entertainment industry. On my birthday, Du Ruo accompanied Xin Zhao to a banquet to secure resources for him. During my new drama's promotion, Du Ruo had the Du family's PR suppress the buzz to create momentum for Xin Zhao. Even my agent was handed over to Xin Zhao by Du Ruo. Even when an elderly couple who once supported me were retaliated against by Xin Zhao for bringing me food, Du Ruo chose to shield Xin Zhao. Du Ruo, who had been hitting and biting me while straddling me, finally calmed down. She helped me up, and in her eyes, I saw myself looking like a tattered rag doll. Brother Qingqi, don't say such foolish things. You love me the most, don't you? Her tone was certain, with hints of madness. But I just shook my head. No, I hate you. Du Ruo's composure shattered in an instant. But this time, she didn't lay hands on me, instead having her bodyguards drag me away to be locked up. For these few days, just give him water, and have someone bandage him up a bit, as long as he doesn't die. She gave me a slight smile. Since you want to divorce me, first experience what life will be like after divorce. For the next 3 days, Du Ruo indeed only provided water. On the 4th day, Du Ruo brought Shen Zhao to open the basement door and entered the basement. Seeing my weak and pale appearance, Du Ruo pressed her lips together with apparent reluctance. Shen Zhao crouched down and patted my face. Director Wei really values you so much that even knowing you've become useless, he still won't let me take your place. Too bad. Since he's being so unreasonable, I'll just have to make him suffer a bit. Hearing Shen Zhao's words, I suddenly raised my voice. What did you do to Director Wei? The reason Director Wei valued me wasn't just because of my diligence and hard work. More importantly, when I dropped out of school to support Du Ruo and couldn't afford the tuition, Director Wei had reached out to help. You could say he watched me grow up step by step. He believed in my character. That's why he was willing to give me this opportunity. Shen Zhao looked at me with a grin, feigning innocence. Want to know? You really want to know? Then beg me. I looked at him angrily, while he slightly lifted his foot. Kneel down and beg for mercy, and I'll consider your request. Then I'll let Director Wei go. Seeing my anger, he smiled. You know I have many followers who do whatever I say. I could be in trouble, but Director Wei is a good person. I absolutely cannot let him be affected because of me. If I do as you say, will you let him go? Of course. Hearing this, I endured great sorrow and humiliation, falling to his feet. Tears fell instantly. I crawled before his feet, speaking with grief. I beg you, please let Director Wei go. Then, I lowered my head in submission. At that moment, Du Ruo pushed open the door and came in. What are you doing? Shen Zhao clutched his chest, as if startled, then walked over. Ruo, he said he deliberately prevented Director Wei from choosing me. After hearing my fans sought justice for me, he actually came down wanting to bite me to death. What are you saying? You actually did that to Director Wei. Shen Zhao, you promised you wouldn't target. Slap. Before I could finish speaking, Du Ruo's hand struck across my face. My vision went dark, as several days of starvation had already left me extremely exhausted. The intense emotional shock pushed my body even closer to its limit. Du Ruo said coldly, "You've gone too far. Yelling at Zhao like that. Do you have a death wish? It's just bullying some worthless director. What's there to care about?" Through the ringing in my ears, I looked at Du Ruo in disbelief, struggling to speak. Du Ruo, don't you remember? Director Wei was the kind person who helped support us in high school. And you let Shen Zhao target him like this? Du Ruo was silent for a moment, then spoke softly. But he made Zhao sad, so there was no choice in the matter. I will help take care of his family. I suddenly came to my senses and looked at Du Ruo, vaguely having a bad premonition. What happened? What's wrong with Director Wei? Du Ruo pursed her lips, avoiding my gaze, while Shen Zhao let out a malicious chuckle. Him? He was too fragile mentally, couldn't handle the attacks, so he jumped off a building. My vision blurred. There was a time when I too had thought about suicide because I couldn't afford to support Du Ruo. That was when I first met Director Wei, a kind middle-aged man who patiently counseled me again and again. He even made funny faces while telling me that suicide was the most painful solution. He told me that no matter how difficult life gets, there's always a way to keep living. Don't commit suicide. Yet, such a cheerful and kind person was driven to suicide by Shen Zhao over a role. I remember that Director Wei's daughter wasn't even of legal age yet. My heart ached severely, and after coughing up blood, I passed out. When I regained consciousness, all I saw was stark white, with the smell of disinfectant filling my breath. Du Ruo was by my bedside, looking haggard and pale. The moment she saw me wake up, she let out a heavy sigh of relief. Just then, the doctor came in for rounds and joked. "This gentleman is quite fortunate. Your wife has been watching over you for 3 days and nights." I pressed my lips tightly and spoke in a hoarse voice. "She's not my wife." Du Ruo's face darkened. After the doctor left, she held my hand and pleaded. "Brother Qingqi, I'm begging you, can we not get divorced?" Just a few days ago, if she had pleaded like this, I would have agreed to any request she made. But now, I just endured the pain and slowly withdrew my hand. Du Ruo's face grew even paler. I spoke softly. "If you don't want a divorce, fine. Bring Shen Zhao here and have him apologize to me." Du Ruo hesitated. I sneered and turned my face away, pretending to doze off, no longer wanting to deal with Du Ruo. Du Ruo gritted her teeth. "Fine, but Zhao has a heart condition. Don't upset him too much." I almost let out a cold laugh. But I couldn't be bothered to argue with Du Ruo. Shen Zhao's heart condition was fake. I had known this for a long time. It was during the first year of my marriage to Du Ruo. Shen Zhao came to our wedding anniversary celebration. During a break, he invited me to the pool, saying he wanted to make peace. However, in a place with no cameras and no people around, Shen Zhao pushed me into the water, then jumped in pretending to be drowning, deliberately stepping on me underwater, trying to drown me. It was also him who later told me, when Du Ruo punished me by making me kneel in the pouring rain. He never had a heart condition at all. Everything was just a calculated scheme against me. I had tried to explain this to Du Ruo many times, but she never believed me, only saying that I was jealous of Shen Zhao. And now, I don't want her trust. I just want what I deserve. Seeing that I remained silent, Du Ruo immediately called Shen Zhao to come. The moment Shen Zhao entered the room, he started crying at the sight of me. "Ruo told me everything. Director Wei was good to you all. It was my fault. I shouldn't have complained about my grievances to the fans." He came to my bedside, pretending to be affectionate, but maliciously pressed hard. D on my broken leg. The intense pain made me instinctively push him away. Shen Zhao didn't fall. Du Ruo caught him, and she looked at me disapprovingly. Didn't I tell you? A Zhao has a weak heart, don't bully him. Shen Zhao held on to Du Ruo, looking pitiful and vulnerable. It's all my fault for having such a bad temper, causing the death of someone who helped you. Du Ruo comforted him while leading him towards the door. What kind of savior is he? Only Brother Qingqi thinks that way. You're not well, don't blame yourself too much. Shen Zhao turned his head, giving me a provocative look. But I didn't care at all. Du Ruo was worried about Shen Zhao's health and left in a hurry. She didn't come to see me for the next few days. Meanwhile, Shen Zhao kept sending me various intimate photos of him with Du Ruo to provoke me. Looking at the photos that would have once cut me like a knife, I remained unmoved, simply saved them, and sent a message to my current agent. My current agent knows Du Ruo and her circle, being another rich heir who ventured into the entertainment industry. But her interest lies in behind-the-scenes work, and she's never liked Du Ruo and Shen Zhao, so she became my agent. I know Director Wei's funeral should be in a few days, and I must go to bid him a final farewell no matter what. 3 days later, my agent Cheng Jing came with a team of bodyguards to pick me up from the hospital room. In the van, she looked at my disheveled state and couldn't help but cry with concern. You're known for your martial arts roles, yet Du Ruo beat you up this badly. My whole body was still in severe pain, and though I tried to force a smile, I didn't say anything. Director Wei and my history, Cheng Jing knows about it. She understands my inner pain, so she remains silent. Director Wei's memorial hall is completely quiet, with only a mother and daughter kneeling in prayer. I know this is all because of Shen Zhao. Because Shen Zhao has cultivated a good public image, and with his family's wealth backing his publicity, he has many devoted fans who can be quite aggressive. Director Wei was essentially driven to death by Shen Zhao, but no one dares to offend him. I wheel my wheelchair slowly into the memorial hall and bow 3 times to his portrait. I'm sorry. I apologize to Director Wei's widow, who says nothing but looks at my legs with sympathy. I take out a bank card. It contains all the earnings from my years of acting. Now that I'm also disabled, there isn't much I can do to help them. However, just as I take out the bank card, a chorus of angry voices erupts outside the memorial hall. From the sound of it, they're all young girls. How dare this Wei person bully our brother? Sisters, today at his funeral, don't let him off. Those who bullied our brother don't deserve peace even as ghosts. As those words fell, Mrs. Wei beside me turned deathly pale. Outside the funeral hall, a group of young women wore offensive bright red clothes, like the color of fresh blood. The girl leading them saw me and immediately threw some unknown liquid in my direction. You're the worthless man who prevented our brother from being selected, right? Disgusting. How could men like you who only rely on connections compare to our brother? Sitting in my wheelchair, with limited mobility, I could only instinctively shield Mrs. Wei. After all, being already disabled, at least I could be useful by protecting Director Wei's family. However, the expected pain never came. When I opened my eyes, I found Mrs. Wei had pulled me away. The bottle seemed to contain just ordinary water, which was now spreading across the ground. Seeing Mrs. Wei protecting me, the lead girl started spewing vulgar insults. As expected, men like you rise to fame by selling yourself. Others please the director, while you please the director's wife. What a pair of adulterers. This director will be a cuckold even in death. I have always respected Director Wei and his family. I instinctively started to explain. However, Shen Zhao's fans had no desire to listen. They even began barging into the memorial hall, smashing things. They outnumbered us. We could only save the memorial portrait. But they weren't planning to let us go. Several young girls charged at me with heavy-looking water bottles. Mrs. Wei instinctively tried to protect me again, but I stopped her. My wheelchair was kicked over by those girls, and a barrage of punches and kicks landed on me. Through gaps in the chaotic crowd, I saw Shen Zhao standing at the entrance of the memorial hall. He smiled at me maliciously, even waving his hand. I saw him video calling with Du Ruo, and for a moment our eyes met through the screen. Du Ruo was slightly stunned. The next moment, my phone started ringing. Just as I was about to hang up, the girl who had been beating me answered the phone instead. Brother Qingqi, as long as you don't divorce me, I'll come save you right now. Du Ruo's voice carried a condescending tone of charity, and the girl who had taken my phone let out a cold laugh. You're this worthless man's wife? How pitiful. Let me tell you the truth. He's been involved with that dead director's wife. Us beating him up is actually doing you a favor. All these girls were minors, not very old at all. She clearly knew that the consequences for minors committing crimes weren't too severe. Du Ruo didn't speak, and the group of girls didn't hang up either. They just kicked my legs hard again. I couldn't help but let out a muffled groan, and Du Ruo's voice immediately became tense. However, the next moment, police cars came roaring up to the funeral hall entrance. Shen Zhao also took the opportunity to leave. Cheng Jing rushed into the funeral hall. If the police Seeing me surrounded and beaten by the girls, she hurried forward to help me up. The lead girl disdainfully whistled. However, in the next moment, Chung Jing's slap landed on her face. Beating others without reason. If your parents haven't taught you better, I'll teach you in their place. Chung Jing was clearly furious. The girl across from her contemptuously spat out her gum and smiled. I'll remember this slap. Poor people like you think you can educate me in place of my parents? You probably don't even know who my parents are. She wore a look of complete disdain, and I could clearly see she was dressed head to toe in luxury brands endorsed by Xinjiao. Such a young lady was clearly from an extraordinary family background, and being a minor, as long as she hadn't committed murder, her parents could get her out of any trouble. Although the Chung family wielded immense power, right now Chung Jing was working on her own startup. I didn't want to cause her any trouble because of my situation. Unexpectedly, Chung Jing let out a cold laugh and made a phone call on the spot. Old man, someone's trying to bully your daughter. Are you going to do something about it? Amidst the girls shouting, Chung Jing first had the police take away all involved personnel. Meanwhile, I was carefully led by her into the van. There was something very urgent. I needed you to enter the memorial hall for earlier. My brother is studying medicine abroad, and I called to ask him. He said when he returns to the country, he's willing to examine you in person. My mind couldn't process this information for a moment. Chung Jing looked at me and explained softly. There might still be hope for your leg and your face. I fell into a daze, experiencing the joy of regaining something lost, until the wetness on my cheeks woke me up, along with Du Rua's angry voice from the phone. Brother Qingqi, which woman are you chatting with? We're not even divorced yet. How can you be with some random woman outside? Just as I was about to hang up the phone, unexpectedly, Chung Jing grabbed it. Are you blind, woman? Or just a hypocrite? You got together with that worthless Xin Zhao in the first year of marriage, and now you're meddling in others' business. Du Rua was clearly guilty. She was speechless for a moment, but I suddenly realized that, without my knowledge, Du Rua and he had already slept together. While Du Rua tried to stammer out an explanation, I directly hung up the phone. After arriving at the police station, Chung Jing first made a phone call, asking the funeral home staff to send over the surveillance footage. Then, she turned to the group of girls and asked if they knew the consequences of their actions. The girl who had been showing off to Chung Jing remained defiant even now. So what? We didn't kill anyone or start a fire, and we're still minors. We were just serving justice by beating up this scumbag. She looked at me with a provocative expression, trying to anger me. However, I had no interest in responding to such juvenile provocations. Even Shun Zhao behind them could no longer stir pain in my heart, let alone these kids. Chung Jing let out a cold laugh and instructed the officer to handle the case according to the law. Moments later, the parents of those girls hurriedly arrived. They first saw me and sneered. You, the live-in son-in-law of the Du family, now you dare to cheat and offend our daughter? That's when I recognized this couple knew Xin Zhao. Their company even relied on the Shen family to survive. No wonder their daughter was so fond of Xin Zhao. Your daughter offended me, and here you are barking before even seeing the main person involved. Seems like you don't want that piece of land in the East District anymore. The couple's faces changed dramatically when they saw Chung Jing. I knew the reason. Although the Shen family was wealthy, they were merely nouveau riche compared to the Chung family. Chung Jing's second brother, despite his young age, was already thriving in the political arena. Business people are always wary of officials. Chung Jing ignored their attempts to curry favor and just looked at me. However you want to handle this matter, I'll support your decision. I thought about Director Wei's past support and Mrs. Wei's help. I want to get justice for Director Wei. Is that okay? I looked at Chen Jing, but before she could speak, Du Rua burst in looking completely distraught. Why are you hanging around with her? We're not divorced yet. You need to keep your distance from other women. She rushed forward to drag me away, using such force that I almost fell from my wheelchair. Fortunately, Chung Jing steadied me. Du Rua stared at Chung Jing's hand, her eyes blazing with fury, while her grip on my wrist tightened painfully. I frowned slightly, brushed her hand away, and looked at her with indifference. Du Rua, I won't accept Shun Zhao's apology. Let's proceed with the divorce. As those words fell, a sudden downpour began outside the police station. After the incident at the police station that day, the troublemaking girls were all punished according to law. Initially, Chung Jing wanted to invite me to stay at her home so she could take care of me. But I declined, as she had already helped me with so many things. I didn't want to cause her any more trouble. I rented an apartment with my acting fee and hired a caregiver to settle down briefly. However, early the next morning after moving in, when I opened the door, I found Du Rua standing dejectedly at my doorstep. Her face was haggard, clothes disheveled, and looking at me, she somewhat resembled her younger self from years ago. Like that night, when she received her high school acceptance letter. Back then, because our savings weren't enough, she had looked at me with the same haggard expression. Back then, my heart would ache for her. But now, I felt unmoved, and even felt like laughing. What brings CEO Du to my place? Mr. Shun, the big star, can't be left alone with his heart condition. Du Rual wanted to argue back, but seemed to remember something and fell silent dejectedly. I could probably guess what she was thinking about. Back when I was filming, the wire harness broke and I suffered severe fractures. When they notified Du Rual to take me to the hospital, she instead chose to take Shen Zhao, who allegedly had a heart attack, away in front of everyone. When I questioned Du Rual in my grief, she said Shen Zhao couldn't live without someone due to his heart condition. Those words eventually came back like a boomerang to hurt herself. I had no intention of getting entangled with him. After all, Director Wei's matter was still unresolved. But when I was about to leave pushing the wheelchair, she reached out and grabbed my sleeve. Du Rual, who was once so arrogant, now appeared as humble as a dog. Even her fingers were trembling. Brother Qingqi, can we not get divorced? I know I was wrong. I'll do anything you want, just don't divorce me. I pried her fingers off one by one, ignoring her pleas, just as she had ignored me in the basement. If you want my forgiveness, then experience all the pain I went through. And Director Wei's death too. I looked at her with bloodshot eyes, my voice filled with undisguised hatred. He was my benefactor. Yet you, worse than an animal, allowed Shen Zhao to cyberbully him. She covered her face and sobbed softly, with longing in her voice. If I do as you say, will you continue our marriage? I nodded slightly, watching the flame of hope ignite in her eyes. The Shen family's influence was considerable, but due to Shen Zhao's incompetence over the years, they had gradually become dependent on the Du family, which explained why Shen Zhao initially refused to marry Du Rual, yet still remained entangled with Du Rual after our marriage. In fact, I had already discovered that Shen Zhao was the one who drugged Du Rual and me back then. At that time, he completely looked down on Du Rual, who had just been adopted, so he didn't want to continue their engagement. Coincidentally, Du Rual and I had reconnected and had our previous bond. Drugging us made perfect sense, and even if anyone had suspicions, they wouldn't suspect him. However, I don't plan to tell Du Rual about this now, because I have more important matters to attend to. Before visiting Cheng Jing's home and meeting her brother, I remained in a state of constant mental tension. Based on the hospital's previous examination results, Du Rual didn't show much mercy when she attacked me. I should have suffered comminuted fractures in both legs by now, and such fractures would leave lasting effects even after healing. Moreover, after Du Rual slashed my face, she splashed water on it, causing an infection. Without timely medical treatment, major cosmetic surgery would be the only option. But I knew well that with such severe damage, even plastic surgery would likely leave visible scars. However, my former brother examined me carefully and told me, "Your body can still be healed, but you need to leave the country with me within a week." Just when I was overjoyed, my phone suddenly rang. It was a call from Du Rual. I answered with a frown, only to hear Du Rual's excited voice. "Brother Qingqi, I found out everything Shen Zhao did to you. He deliberately deceived me by faking a heart condition. I know I was wrong now, and he will pay the price." I can only laugh at Du Rual's belated attempt to remedy the situation. After all, I had told her dozens of times about Shen Zhao faking his heart condition. If she had just investigated carefully, she wouldn't have only discovered this now. At this point, what's the use of telling me all this? I was about to hang up without bothering to respond to Du Rual when Cheng Jing suddenly exclaimed, "Quick, look at the trending topics." Following Cheng Jing's words, I opened my phone and saw the top trending topic was about Shen Zhao. It was a video where Shen Zhao appeared exhausted and nervous. He admitted to directing his fans to cyberbully Director Wei, and even confessed to faking his heart condition multiple times. He admitted using this to build his public image and gain sympathy from fans. Additionally, he also admitted to interfering in my marriage with Du Rual. In fact, regarding the cyberbullying from Shen Zhao's fans, I was the primary victim. It was in the second year of my marriage with Du Rual when Shen Zhao was photographed entering and leaving a hotel with her. At that time, Du Rual was still wearing her wedding ring, and her marital status was quickly exposed. Back then, Du Rual and I hadn't deliberately hidden our marriage from the public. People soon began to criticize Shen Zhao, but he managed to manipulate the situation with some ambiguous statements. He guided his fans, making them believe that I had drugged Du Rual to marry into a higher social class, that I was the one who had come between them. I wanted to explain, but under Du Rual's hints, all my channels to speak up were blocked. For a full year and a half, I lived under the shadow of cyberbullying. Receiving funeral wreaths, being doxxed, and having my obituary photos made and splashed with pig's blood were common occurrences. And now, those who once cyberbullied me are turning against Shen Zhao after learning the truth. Over the phone, Du Rual's voice was filled with pride, even seeking credit from me. "See? Everything he did to you back then, I've paid him BAC. K in full. Cheng Jing can't do anything for you. Only I can shelter you from wind and rain. We shouldn't get divorced. Hearing her smug words, I couldn't help but speak softly. But if it weren't for you, I wouldn't have had to endure these hardships in the first place. Shen Zhao cyberbullied me because of you, and my leg and face were both ruined by you. Du Ruo, you absolutely cannot protect me from anything. She seemed to realize what I was about to say, and tried to stop me with a trembling voice. But I paid no attention, disregarding her pleas. I'll be taking a flight the day after tomorrow, going abroad to treat my face and leg. As for the divorce, Cheng Jing, as my agent, will have a lawyer discuss it with you. Du Ruo, let's end it here. I hung up the phone before she could speak. However, just as I was about to board the plane, an audio file was sent to me. In the audio content was Shun Zhao's painful pleading and screaming. His every word was filled with anguish, reminiscent of my own suffering in that basement. Shun Zhao repeatedly apologized, confessing word by word how he had framed and targeted me in the past. And Du Ruo's voice was cold and cruel. Brother Qingqi, I think what you said that day was wrong, because we were actually the childhood sweethearts. It was all his manipulation after I was adopted that made me change my heart. Just wait. I will soon make him atone for his sins against you, and I will atone as well. Even if I die, I want to die as your wife. I didn't want to deal with Du Ruo and Shun Zhao's ocean of hatred and love. I simply turned off my phone and blocked both Du Ruo and Shun Zhao. 5 years later, I successfully completed treatment and returned to China. Cheng Jing came to pick me up at the airport with my former fan site administrator. In the private car, Cheng Jing mentioned a name I had long forgotten. After you left back then, Du Ruo and Shun Zhao had a huge fallout. Originally, having Du Ruo apologize to Shun Zhao was already a calculated decision weighing pros and cons with the Shin family, who knew she would secretly kidnap Shun Zhao and break all his limbs. Although the Shin family had fallen from grace, even a broken ship still has its worth. They forced Du Ruo's birth parents to expel her from the Du family. Now her adopted sister is in charge of the Du family. Hearing this news, I couldn't help but feel dazed, thinking back to when I first reunited with Du Ruo. She often felt dejected because she wasn't as outstanding as her adopted sister. I used to comfort her back then. However, now things have come to this. She has ultimately fallen into the fate she feared most. I remained silent, clearly not wanting to say more. Cheng Jing let out a sigh. Now Du Ruo is married to Shun Zhao, because she left him unable to care for himself. The Shun family parents mad. Her responsible for taking care of Shun Zhao. After all, he's their only son. At today's welcome banquet, the organizer happens to have connections with the Shin family. I heard they both came. If you really don't want to go, I can help you decline. I waved my hand, indicating to Cheng Jing not to bother. When I arrived at the banquet hall, I indeed saw the haggard Du Ruo and Shun Zhao in his wheelchair. Du Ruo's eyes lit up the moment she saw me, while Shun Zhao's expression was resentful. I walked past them, heading straight into the guest hall. During a break in the banquet, Du Ruo found me. Looking at me, who had now fully recovered and appeared exactly as before, her eyes were full of excitement. Brother Qingqi, it's so wonderful that you've recovered. I wronged you back then. Could you please not hate me? She looked at me with a pleading expression. However, looking at her now, my heart was as still as water. For someone like her, even hatred felt too precious to waste. I just waved my hand and looked behind her. We are now strangers, and your husband is waiting for you. Du Ruo's face turned extremely unpleasant in that instant. And I noticed that after I left, Shin Zhao seemed to have attacked Du Ruo. I barely paid attention to the woman's faint screams. 3 months later, I held my comeback ceremony again. However, I didn't manage to top the trending topics that day. The #1 trending topic was still about Shin Zhao. It was news of Shin Zhao's death. After killing Shin Zhao, Du Ruo turned herself in. Looking at her last words, Cheng Jing asked me. She wanted your forgiveness until her death. It seems she was quite sincere about it. I looked out the window. Late-coming affection is more worthless than grass. After the fall of the Shin family, that orphanage finally has a chance for reform. Rather than